When people talk about the greatest war films ever made, titles like Saving Private Ryan, Dunkirk, and Band of Brothers often come up. But before any of those, there was 12 O'Clock High, a 1949 film that didn't just depict World War II. It captured the psychological toll of leadership, the burden of command, and the day-to-day hell of high-altitude bombing in a way no film had before. At first glance, it may look like another old black-and-white war movie, but it's far more than that. 12 O'Clock High is a serious and unflinching portrayal of what it took to lead men into the skies over Nazi Germany in the early years of the air war. Let's break down the film's story, its historical context, and why its influence is still felt today in both cinema and leadership training. Set in 1942, 12 O'Clock High tells the story of the 918th Bomb Group of the U.S. Army Air Forces, based in England and flying daylight bombing missions over occupied Europe. The unit has a reputation for high losses and low morale. The men are exhausted, the officers are burned out, and discipline has broken down. The turning point comes when General Frank Savage, played by Gregory Peck, is brought in to take command. Savage is a tough, no-nonsense leader who immediately cracks down on what he sees as coddling and disorganization. He replaces officers, imposes strict discipline, and demands maximum performance. At first, the men resent him, but slowly, through his uncompromising standards and willingness to fly with the group, he begins to earn their respect. The heart of the film isn't in action scenes, though there are several gripping sequences, but in the emotional arc of its characters. It's about how men deal with pressure, fear, responsibility, and failure. It's about leadership under extreme circumstances. 12 O'Clock High is deeply rooted in real history. The story is based on actual events surrounding the early bombing campaigns of the 8th Air Force in 1942 and 1943. The 918th Bomb Group is a fictionalized version of the 306th Bomb Group. The film's screenwriters, Bartlett and Beirne Jr., were both veterans. Lay flew combat missions and served in public relations for the 8th Air Force. While Bartlett was an intelligence officer, many of the film's characters are amalgams of real people. General Savage is believed to be loosely based on Brigadier General Frank Armstrong, a hard-charging leader who restructured a failing bomber group and led the first daylight bombing raid over Nazi-occupied Europe. His leadership style and combat experience are echoed in the film. The challenges faced by the bomber crews were also very real. In the early days of the air war, the idea was that heavily armed bombers flying in tight formations could protect themselves without fighter escorts, but losses were catastrophic. Crews flew long, freezing missions deep into enemy territory, often facing heavy flak and relentless attacks by German fighters. The psychological and physical toll was immense, and morale plummeted as casualty rates soared. The film captures this grim reality better than most war films of its time. At the center of the film is General Frank Savage, a man torn between his role as a commander and his empathy for the men under him. When he takes command, he intentionally distances himself from the crew, believing that personal relationships will make it harder to make tough decisions. But this isolation gradually eats away at him. He wants to be seen as fair, not cruel, but he also knows that in war, there is no room for compromise when lives are at stake. His journey is one of slow breakdown. Despite being the model of control and strength early in the film, Savage eventually suffers a mental collapse. It's not sudden. It's the result of accumulated stress, survivor's guilt, and exhaustion. His eventual breakdown is one of the film's most powerful moments and marks one of the first serious depictions of combat fatigue, or what we now call PTSD, in American cinema. Supporting characters like Colonel Davenport, the original commander of the group, represent the sympathetic, fatherly leadership style that ultimately proved ineffective in such brutal conditions. Lieutenant Jesse Bishop serves as the group's conscience and provides a ground-level view of the pressures that airmen faced. Major Stovall, the gruff but caring legal officer, offers another perspective, the weary bureaucrat who's seen too many young men die. Each of these characters helps paint a complete picture of the bomber group's world, and while Savage is the film's driving force, the story is very much an ensemble tale. One of the reasons 12 O'Clock High has had such a lasting legacy is its exploration of leadership in crisis. The film is widely used in military and corporate leadership training, even decades after its release. This is because it tackles issues that transcend war: how to lead people through high-stress situations, how to earn trust, and when to push or pull back. Savage's leadership style is not portrayed as ideal but necessary. He doesn't win the men over with charisma or empathy, but with clarity and integrity. He leads from the front, joins the bombing missions, and shares the risks. His mental collapse isn't shown as weakness, but as a human response to extraordinary pressure. The film asks tough questions. How much can one man take? What's the cost of putting duty over emotion? And when does leadership become isolation? In this way, 12 O'Clock High is less about winning the war and more about surviving it, mentally, emotionally, and morally. While the film focuses on characters and themes, it still delivers some of the most authentic aerial combat footage ever put on screen. Many of the air battle sequences use actual wartime footage, making the scenes feel raw and documentary-like. The black and white visuals give the combat scenes a stark, almost haunting quality. There's very little romanticizing of the fighting. You don't see triumphant music or exaggerated heroics. Instead, the film shows planes falling from the sky, close calls with flak bursts, and the terrifying silence of a crew waiting to see if their plane will come back in one piece. In fact, the film's restrained approach to action makes it more effective. Instead of overloading the viewer with spectacle, it zeroes in on the stress and routine of combat, the tension before a mission, the noise inside the aircraft, the confusion of battle, and the exhaustion afterward. When 12 O'Clock High was released in 1949, it was met with critical acclaim. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards and won 2, including Best Supporting Actor for Dean Jagger and Best Sound Recording. But its impact went far beyond awards. The film became a favorite of military personnel, leadership trainers, and aviation enthusiasts. Real bomber crews praised it for its authenticity. In fact, many veterans said it was the only film that truly captured what it felt like to fly those missions over Europe. Unlike many war movies of the era, it didn't glamorize combat or simplify its moral questions. In the decades since, the film has been shown in military academies and business schools as a case study in leadership, morale, and command responsibility. It's considered one of the most realistic portrayals of combat stress and officer decision-making in cinema. Filmmakers also took note. Directors like Steven Spielberg and Christopher Nolan have cited 12 O'Clock High as an influence, especially in their depiction of stress under fire and tight-knit military units. 12 O'Clock High isn't just a war movie. It's a psychological drama, a leadership manual, and a tribute to a generation of men who endured one of the most dangerous assignments of World War II. It avoids sentimentality and propaganda. It doesn't preach. Instead, it shows the quiet desperation of leaders who must send men into danger, the toll it takes to maintain discipline in the face of tragedy, and the emotional strain of command. More than 70 years after its release, the film still holds up. Its themes are timeless, its performances are powerful, and its honesty remains refreshing. Whether you're interested in military history, leadership, or just great storytelling, 12 O'Clock High is a film that demands attention. It's a reminder that wars are not just won with machines and tactics, but with people, flawed, determined, and often deeply scarred.